She walked into a high-security federal complex with a USB drive that looked like it belonged in a pawn shop. The tech at the desk smirked, thinking she was some lost retiree, until he plugged it in, and the entire facility locked down in a blaze of sirens and holographic code. That wasn't just any USB. It was the key to a secret that could have brought the system to its knees. Want to know who she really was, and why they regretted laughing at her? Smash that subscribe button, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and let's dive into a story that'll make you rethink judging a book by its cover. The Nevada morning was already warm, the kind of dry heat that made your skin feel like parchment. At a Starbucks just off Highway 95, a stone's throw from the Desert Research Complex, the parking lot was a mix of sleek government SUVs and dusty pickups, with a neon sign flickering in the early light. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee and sugar syrup, the hum of espresso machines blending with the chatter of federal employees grabbing their morning fix. A barista called out orders, "Grande latte for Ryan," while a radio played a pop remix that felt out of place in the desert. Ryan Torres, 25, stood in line, his Desert Research Complex badge clipped to his belt, his posture radiating the cocky ease of someone who'd just won a hacking competition at DF Con. His short black hair was gelled back, and his smartwatch blinked with notifications from X, where he'd been bragging about cracking a mock Pentagon server in 22 minutes. Next to him, Sarah Klein, his co-worker, scrolled through her phone, her blonde ponytail bobbing as she laughed at a meme. Both were security techs at the complex, young enough to think they'd seen it all, too young to know they hadn't. Behind them, Eleanor Harper stepped into line, her presence barely registering. At 58, she was a black woman with a weathered grace. Her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her face free of makeup, but sharp with quiet intensity. She wore a faded flannel shirt, loose jeans, and scuffed work boots, the kind you'd see on a ranch hand, not a tech guru. A worn canvas bag hung from her shoulder, and in her hand was a crumpled Starbucks coupon, the kind you get in junk mail, but only use if you're counting pennies. She ordered a plain black coffee, sliding the coupon across the counter with a polite nod. The barista, a kid with a nose ring, raised an eyebrow but scanned it without comment. Torres caught the exchange, his lips curling into a half smirk. "Who still uses paper coupons in 2025? He muttered to Klein, loud enough for Elena to hear. Klein snorted, glancing at Elena's outfit. "Maybe she's saving up for a new flip phone," she whispered back, her giggle sharp in the morning quiet. Elena didn't react, her eyes fixed on the barista as she took her coffee and headed for the door. Outside, she climbed into a battered Ford F-150, its red paint chipped from years of desert roads. She set her coffee in a cup holder, pulled a homemade sandwich from a cooler on the passenger seat, and took a bite, her movements methodical, like someone used to eating on the go. From the window, Torres watched, his smirk widening. "Check it out," he said, nudging Klein. "Looks like she's living out of that truck. Probably delivers mail or something." Klein laughed, snapping a quick photo of the truck for her X story. "Total farmer vibes," she said. "Bet she's got a pitchfork in the back." Elena, oblivious or unconcerned, checked a small plastic case in her bag. Inside was a black USB drive, its surface scratched, marked with a faint code, E7X. She tucked it away, sipped her coffee, and started the engine, the truck rumbling to life with a familiar cough. Torres and Klein headed to their own car, a sleek Tesla leased on a government stipend, still chuckling about the coupon lady as they drove toward the complex, unaware they'd see her again in less than an hour. The Desert Research Complex stood like a fortress in the Nevada desert, its concrete walls and razor wire cutting against the horizon. A federal hub for AI and cybersecurity, It housed algorithms too sensitive for public servers, satellite encryption, quantum firewalls, tech that could outsmart nation-state hackers. The parking lot held black Tahoes and maintenance vans, their tires dusted with red dirt. Eleanor Harper pulled her battered Ford F-150 into a visitor spot, tires crunching gravel. She stepped out, her canvas bag slung over her shoulder, the plastic case with the USB tucked inside. Her boots hit the ground with a steady rhythm, her slight limp, subtle but present. The glass doors of the main entrance slid open, revealing a reception area of polished concrete and fluorescent lights. A flat screen cycled PSAs about phishing scams, their warnings flickering in the sterile space. At the check-in desk, Ryan Torres and Sarah Klein slouched, their morning shift dragging. Torres tapped a touchscreen console, while Klein scrolled X, her Starbucks cup balanced on a stack of manuals. Elena approached, her expression calm but focused. "I'm here to see Colonel Rachel Carter," she said, her voice low, wasting no words. Torres looked up, his eyes narrowing as he recognized her from Starbucks. "Wait, the coupon lady?" he said, his tone half amused, half disbelieving. "This is a secure facility, ma'am, not the post office." Klein smirked, leaning forward. "Yeah, no offense, but this place is for tech people." She glanced at Elena's faded flannel and jeans, her grin sharp. Elena didn't blink, her gaze steady. "I have an appointment." "Check the system for Elena Harper." Torres snorted, typing her name with exaggerated skepticism. The screen flashed. "Visitor access granted. Escort to Security Verification Lab." His smirk faltered, but he shrugged it off. "All right, you're on the list. Carter's clearance checks out, so we'll take you to the lab. But we're checking that bag first." Elena nodded, sliding the plastic case from her bag. Torres popped it open, revealing a black USB drive, its scratched surface and faded E7X code looking like a relic. He laughed, holding it up. "What is this, a thrift store find? This thing's older than my crypto wallet." Klein chuckled, peering over. "Bet it's running Windows XP." Elena stood still, her calm almost unnerving, like someone who'd faced worse than snarky techs. "Protocol says we check it in the verification lab," Elena said, her voice steady. "Let's go." Torres raised an eyebrow, still grinning. "Fine, let's see what this fossil does. But don't expect it to work on our quantum cores." He gestured for her to follow, his tone dripping with condescension, leading her toward a secure corridor. The Security Verification Lab was a sterile room, deep inside the desert research complex, its walls lined with server racks and air-gapped computers. The air hummed with cooling fans, a single console dominating the space, its screen glowing with a blockchain-based interface. Biometric scanners flanked the door, their red lights blinking steadily. Ryan Torres led Elena Harper inside, holding her scratched USB like a bad joke. Sarah Klein followed, curiosity overriding her smirk. A guard in a tactical vest stood by the door, hand on his taser. Torres plugged the USB into the console's isolated port, his movements casual. "Let's see what this antique does," he said, tapping the keys. "Probably got Clippy on it." Klein laughed, leaning against a rack. "Or a MySpace virus?" Elena's eyes stayed on the screen, her expression unreadable. The console hummed, then snapped, a sharp mechanical click echoing in the quiet. The screen went black, then erupted into a 3D holographic sphere, white fractal patterns pulsing like a living thing. Encrypted code streamed across the bottom, unreadable without top clearance. Bold text flashed, Omega clearance detected. Priority access granted. Notify command immediately. A siren screamed, tearing through the complex. Torres froze, hand on the USB. Klein's coffee cup shattered on the floor, dark liquid pooling. The screen's blue glow lit their faces, the fractal spinning faster. Elena looked up, calm as ever. "It worked," she said, her voice cutting through the wail. The guard tensed, gripping his radio. The fractal twisted, defying the screen's resolution. Red text sliced through. Security lock engaged. Omega clearance protocol active. Command authority required. Amber lights flickered down the hall, doors sealing with thuds. The guard's radio crackled. "Verification lab. This is control. Lock it down, not a drill." Torres yanked the USB out, but the fractal kept spinning, sirens unrelenting. "This isn't right," he stammered, bravado gone. "No shit," Klein muttered, eyes wide. "Did we break the system?" "It's not broken," Elena said, hands relaxed, bag slung over her shoulder. "It's doing what it's supposed to." The guard's voice shook on the radio. "Control, Lab 1. Omega level event, live. Need senior authority now." Torres stared at Elena, pale. "Ma'am, is this a glitch?" "No error," Elena said, her tone steady. "Just a test you weren't ready for." The Desert Research Complex locked down, its halls lit by flashing amber lights as automatic doors sealed with heavy thuds. Sirens wailed, a relentless scream echoing through the concrete corridors. Inside the verification lab, the air was thick with tension. The fractal pattern on the console pulsing like a heartbeat, its blue glow bathing the room. Ryan Torres stood frozen, hands hovering over the console, his earlier bravado gone. Sarah Klein paced, her eyes wide, muttering, "We broke the system." The guard at the door gripped his radio, his voice shaky. "Control, this is Lab 1. Omega level event, live, not a test. Need senior authority, now." His eyes darted to Elena Harper, who stood calmly, her canvas bag slung over her shoulder, as if she'd seen this chaos before. The console screen flashed red. Security lock engaged. Omega clearance protocol active. Command authority required. Torres yanked the USB out, but the fractal kept spinning, the siren unrelenting. "This is a glitch, right?" he stammered, looking at Elena. "A serious system error?" "No error," Elena said, her tone calm, almost gentle. "It's doing what it's supposed to." A side door marked "Restricted Access" slammed open, and Master Sergeant Daniel Voss strode in, his uniform crisp, his face etched with strain. A former soldier turned security chief, his graying buzz cut and sharp eyes carried the weight of someone who'd traded combat for control. "What the hell is going on?" he barked, his voice cutting through the siren. Torres straightened, pale as chalk. "Sir, she gave us this USB. We plugged it in, and it triggered this." He pointed at the console, the blue sphere pulsing ominously. Klein jumped in, her words rushed. "It's Omega clearance, sir, and the system locked up." Voss raised a hand, silencing them. He faced Elena, his voice careful, like navigating a minefield. "Ma'am, explain this." "Now." "I'm here for Colonel Carter," Elena said, unflinching. "The USB is part of my assignment. Call her." Voss's jaw tightened, but the speaker crackled, a new voice cutting through, calm but urgent. "But verification lab, this is security control. Omega clearance confirmed active. Dispatching command personnel. Treat subject with full courtesy protocols. Do not detain." Voss tugged at his collar, sweat beading. "Courtesy protocols," he muttered. Klein frowned. "What's that mean?" "It means," Voss said, his tone grim, "she outranks us all. and we treated her like a nobody. Two security officers appeared, a man and woman in tactical vests, their gear precise, like escorts for a VIP. Their eyes swept the room, landing on Elena and the fractal. The male officer stepped forward, his tone firm but respectful. "Ma'am, we're escorting you to Sector Command for verification." Elena nodded, moving toward them without hesitation. Torres watched, mouth slightly open, like he'd seen a ghost. The officers flanked her, heading toward a secure corridor lined with biometric scanners. Klein stepped back, as if proximity to Elena might burn. Voss exhaled, watching them disappear. "Get me her file," he said, his voice low. Torres shook his head, staring at the console. Black Ops coder. "NSA?" The guard turned, his voice heavy. "She's not on the grid. She's above it." The Sector Command wing was a maze of glass offices and humming server racks, usually a hub of quiet efficiency. Analysts passing code, engineers debugging quantum algorithms, the steady pulse of bureaucracy keeping the nation's secrets safe. But today, it buzzed with a different energy, like a hive stirred by an intruder. Elena sat in a conference room, her hands resting on a sleek glass table, her expression as neutral as it had been at Starbucks. The fractal pattern still spun on a wall-mounted display, its hypnotic glow casting shadows across the room. No one had figured out how to stop it, or dared to try. Outside, a cluster of analysts huddled near a vending machine, pretending to check emails while stealing glances through the glass. A junior officer peeked around a corner, saw Elena, and retreated, whispering into a headset. The door to the wing slammed open, and Colonel Rachel Carter stormed in, her presence like a thunderclap. Steel-gray hair cropped regulation short, a tailored uniform with silver eagles gleaming on her shoulders, she moved with the authority of someone who'd spent decades bending chaos to her will. No aides, no clipboard, just a black tablet tucked under her arm, its screen glowing with classified data. "Who triggered Omega clearance?" she demanded, her voice carrying down the hall like a command on a battlefield. "And why wasn't I notified the second it happened?" No one answered. The analysts scattered, suddenly engrossed in their screens. A civilian contractor started to mumble about a system error, but Carter cut her off with a look that could stop a tank. She marched into the conference room and faced Elena directly. "Miss Harper." Elena inclined her head slightly. "Colonel, still making entrances like you own the place." Carter's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "I prefer to think of it as getting people's attention." She turned to the gaggle of staff who'd followed her, drawn by curiosity or fear. "Let's clear this up," she said, her voice like a blade. "This isn't a glitch, a hack, or some intern screw-up." She tapped her tablet, pulling up a classified file, its edges marked with red encryption bars. "This," she said, holding it up, "is a record from a program you've never heard of, because you were never meant to. Project Cerberus. Authorization level, Omega. Only 8 people in U.S. history were ever granted this clearance. 5 are dead. 2 are unaccounted for. The 8th is sitting right here." She pointed at Elena, then fixed her gaze on Torres and Klein, who'd crept upstairs, looking like they wanted to melt into the floor. "And you thought she was a joke." The silence was suffocating. Carter didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Ms. Harper is the reason this facility's AI security protocols exist. 20 years ago, she designed the Cerberus system, a firewall that stopped a foreign syndicate from stealing satellite codes that could have started a war. And today, she walked in here with a USB that exposed a critical vulnerability in that same system, one you didn't even know existed." She paused, letting the weight settle. "This was a test, and you failed. Hard." Torres swallowed, his face ashen. Klein's eyes dropped to the floor, her earlier bravado gone. Carter continued, her voice steady but sharp. That USB wasn't a relic. It was a diagnostic tool, coded to simulate a breach. When you plugged it in, it triggered Omega clearance, because Ms. Harper is one of the few people on Earth authorized to test this system. The lockdown? That was the system reacting to a potential threat. One you didn't catch because you were too busy laughing. Eleanor spoke for the first time, her voice calm but firm. The vulnerabilities in the authentication layer. A backdoor left from an old patch. If I can exploit it, so can someone else. You've got 48 hours before I report this to NSA. Carter nodded, her expression grim. We'll patch it by end of day, but this could have been catastrophic. She turned to Torres and Klein. Effective immediately. You're both reassigned to facility maintenance. Report to the custodial supervisor at 0600 tomorrow. You'll learn respect somewhere between scrubbing floors and cleaning server vents. She closed the tablet with a snap. Everyone else, back to work. This is classified above your pay grade. She gestured to Elena. Walk with me. Elena stood, her movements precise, and followed Carter out of the room. The hallway parted around them, staff stepping aside like they were avoiding a live wire. The air felt different now, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Carter set a steady pace, her boots clicking against the tile. Elena matched her stride, her bag swinging lightly at her side. We kept your access active, Carter said, once they were out of earshot. Didn't think you'd ever use it. Didn't plan to, Elena replied. But I saw the chatter on a dark pool forum. Someone's been probing Cerberus. I had to make sure. Carter nodded, her expression softening slightly. You could have called. Saved us the theatrics. Elena's lips curved, just a hint. Sometimes theatrics teach better than a memo. They passed a wall of framed awards, commendations for cybersecurity breakthroughs, photos of ribbon cuttings, the kind of decor that filled federal buildings but went unnoticed by most. Carter slowed near a portrait of a man in a suit, his eyes sharp despite his age. You remember Kessler? She asked. Elena nodded. Good man. Saved my ass in 03. Didn't make it to 04. He fought to keep your clearance active. Said some codes should never be deleted, no matter what DC. Wanted. They continued past a display case of tech relics, early microchips, a prototype drone, plaques listing patents that had changed the world. You carrying much these days? Carter asked, her voice softer. Eleanor considered the question. Weight's always there. You just get better at carrying it. Carter gave a small nod. Thought you'd say that. Colonel Rachel Carter and Elena Harper reached a window overlooking the parking lot, the Nevada sun turning the asphalt into a shimmering haze. Elena's battered Ford F-150 sat alone, its chipped red paint stark against the government SUVs. Carter paused, her voice low. Those kids, Torres, Klein, they're green. Haven't learned respect comes first. They'll learn, Elena said, her gaze steady, or they won't last. Carter smiled faintly. You could teach them. Your voice carries. I've said enough, Elena replied, looking out at her truck. Today was the reminder. Carter nodded, holding open a side exit, no fanfare, just two people who knew words weren't always needed. Take care, Elena. Always do, Elena said, stepping into the heat. The sun stung as she crossed the lot, her boots steady on the concrete. Her truck started with a familiar rumble, the engine coughing once before settling in. She adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the Desert Research Complex, its concrete walls fading in the haze. Analysts inside were likely still whispering about the lockdown, but Elena didn't linger on it. She'd lived it. The drive out was quiet, the radio playing soft country as she passed maintenance crews unloading crates. Near the gate, she saw Torres and Klein in maintenance coveralls, carrying mops, their faces a mix of shame and respect. Klein looked up as the truck passed, raising a hesitant hand. Elena gave a slight nod, just enough, and kept driving. Onto the desert highway, the wind whipped through her open windows, carrying the faint satisfaction of someone who'd reminded the world that dignity isn't proven, it's carried. Behind her, the complex settled into its rhythm, but something had shifted. Maybe in-house staff would now speak to strangers who didn't fit their mold. From a third-floor window, Carter watched the truck fade into the heat haze. A young analyst approached, clutching a tablet full of incident reports. "Colonel, what do I log this as?" Carter didn't turn. "A system verification. Resolved without issue. All personnel briefed. And the woman with the Omega clearance?" Carter faced him, her expression unreadable. "What woman?" "Omega clearance doesn't exist." She walked away, leaving the analyst with a tablet full of questions about an event that, officially, never happened. And somewhere on the highway, Eleanor Harper drove with the windows down, the desert wind carrying the faint satisfaction of someone who'd reminded the world that dignity isn't something you prove. It's something you carry until you choose to let it go. Ever been underestimated until one moment changed everything? What would you do if you held a code that could stop a system in its tracks? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story hit you with the truth that respect belongs to everyone until they prove otherwise, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of quiet strength. Know someone whose story deserves to be heard? Share this with them. The real heroes are often the ones you'd never suspect. More stories like this are waiting. Check them out next, and we'll see you tomorrow, right here on Courage Unseen.